So I can't take any credit for that pumpkin behind me. Mel made that one. She's much better than I am. The only thing is, I think she made that pumpkin a little bit too soon because it's starting to rot. It has furry mould in it and it really smells. If it disappears in the middle of the video, that's why. It's because it's getting to the point where it's starting to make me feel a little bit sick. Happy Halloween!
Put the bunny back in the box.
So, October the 31st, 1992. We're going back to a time when I was a very young child. Very young. But I remember watching a show called Ghostwatch. And let's give a bit of history on Ghostwatch before I go into my thoughts on it now, because I've rewatched it yesterday, so I rewatched the whole thing to see if it stands up to the test of time, really, and to whether it was worth all the fuss that it caused. But accepting that quite a lot of you may not have been born in 1992 or not around, you may have never even heard of Ghostwatch. So I'm going to set the scene with what this was. It was a show that was presented, it was a one-off, presented by Michael Parkinson, and had a variety of people there. Most of them are well-known faces playing themselves. So the likes of Craig Charles was there as an on-the-spot reporter. And it was depicting a story of a haunted house, a house that's haunted by a poltergeist. There's a mother who lives there and there's two children. And it's very clearly taken from the Enfield poltergeist story. The one you've seen in The Conjuring 2. And the one that was only a few streets away from where I lived. I've mentioned that before, but it's a thing I've only found out recently and it scared me at the time. Glad I didn't know how close I lived to where that thing apparently took place. But this was billed as a drama. It was said that it was a drama. It was by Scream 1, I think it was called, who was the drama side of the BBC. So, yeah, there was efforts to make sure that people did know that this wasn't based on real events, but I don't think there was quite enough done. Because this was 1992, so this was before the internet. This was before you could quickly do a Google search to find out whether something's real or not. And the way it was shot and the way that it was done made it seem like it was real in places. Once it got to the end, things derailed a little bit in the show. Like, it escalated to the point where most people would have accepted the fact that this was make-believe, but up until that point, it was done with such sincerity. And people like Sarah Green, a well-known presenter, she presented children's TV over here, like Going Live and things. So, yeah, again, faces people knew, and they were playing themselves. And it would be fair to say, quite a lot of the UK public fell for it. Fell for it in a big way. Thousands and thousands of calls were made to the BBC. Thousands of them. And I believe it was somewhere in the region of 20,000, maybe it might have been 2. Many people complained about this show. It's the highest number of complaints ever, to the point where the BBC essentially banned it. They essentially did not allow this thing to be seen again for a decade. It was around 2002 when this show got another airing, not on the BBC. It's been aired elsewhere. You can find it on YouTube. I believe it's still on there. You can buy the DVD now, but for a long period of time, the backlash against this show was so huge that the BBC just pretty much pretended they never made it. They washed their hands completely of it. And it wasn't helped by the fact that there was a young man's suicide around that time that was blamed on Ghostwatch. An 18-year-old named Martin Denham, he was a factory worker and he suffered from learning difficulties. They said he had a mental age of 13, but he was allegedly so scared of what he'd seen and so affected by this show that he killed himself. So, while, yeah, this is kind of a light-hearted look at Ghostwatch, I just want to stress the point that there are some serious aspects to this. Do I think that a TV show is directly responsible for somebody killing themselves? Well, I hope not, but a lot of people did. And again, it's one of those reasons why the BBC was so quick to be like, yep, we're not going to mention this show ever again. You can see why. It got to the point where Sarah Green had to appear in the Broom Cupboard, which was where Children's BBC was set. It was their little studio, it was called the Broom Cupboard, and she had to go on there on the Monday, because she said on a Saturday, to basically go, I'm still alive, like I'm still here, everything's fine, it wasn't real. But yeah, a lot of people kicked up a fuss about this, and it's probably one of the most controversial shows that the UK's ever made. And I remember watching it, even though I was a very young child. I remember watching this show and it terrified me. I think it may be what got me into ghosts and the supernatural and everything to begin with, because I, call me nuts, but I believe in ghosts. I've seen enough personally to believe in them. If you want to know anything more about that, ask me some questions, happy to talk about it. But yeah, I've always had a bit of a connection with the supernatural and with ghosts. Fun little bit of trivia. My dad, who I'm not overly close to these days, hope he's not watching this, but he was a medium. He was one of the biggest mediums in the UK, and he was outed by the News of the World as a fraud. So yeah, he made all of the papers, but even my mum, who isn't the biggest fan of my dad in the world, she still believes that some of the things that he was doing was genuine because she didn't see any way that he could have faked a lot of what he did. So if she's sticking up for him, I'm inclined to believe that there was more to it than a guy just tricking people. But yeah, that made the news. So once I found out that, combined with this, I've always had an interest in the supernatural, in the creepy, in the paranormal. And I've often wondered, if my dad could do it, could I be a medium myself? I'm kind of too scared to find out. Never tried. Probably never will. But to get back to the point, shows like Ghostwatch are what got me into the paranormal. What made me love it all. It made me investigate it. It made me look into things and read up on as much as I can. So I was very curious going back to this 26 years later, to see whether it still holds up, to see whether it's still as scary as I remember it being, and more importantly, to see whether it was worth all the fuss that it caused in the first place. And having watched it, no, I don't think it is worth all the fuss that it caused, but it's important to remember that 26 years ago was a very, very different time. Like, we've seen a lot more shocking things on TV than this, by a long way. And a lot more scarier things as well. Like, several films have come out this year that are scarier than Ghostwatch is, but Ghostwatch worked because of when it came out. If it came out now, it wouldn't even get a bat of an eyelid, I don't think. I don't think it would get anywhere near as much of... In fact, it wouldn't get anywhere near as much of a reaction as it did. It wouldn't get anywhere near the number of complaints. Because, as I say, people can just go onto their computer, do a quick search, and just get their phone out and search to see whether it's real, and they'd see within a second that it was all fictional. But back in 1992, people couldn't do that. And it's kind of understandable why, until the final few minutes at least, a lot of people genuinely believed what they were watching was real. So as I say, I have watched it, and it's a genuinely creepy show. It's more creepy than it is scary, I think. And that's down to who's involved. Like Michael Parkinson, if you're outside of the UK, that name might not mean much to you, but just imagine sort of one of America's biggest talk show hosts, who interviews celebrities and things, and he's well known, everybody likes him, and he does a show like this. He does something where he's still presenting with his normal persona, where he's still that person you see presenting a show, but he's dealing with very, very supernatural things, very, very extreme things. That's what this was. Michael Parkinson brought a level of sincerity to this. He made it seem real, because you've got Michael Parkinson, like, he doesn't really mess about that much. He's somebody that viewers have known for such a long time that they trust. The likes of Sarah Green involved as well, well-known children's presenter, and they depicted, and spoilers for Ghostwatch, I mean, it's 26 years old, I shouldn't need to say spoilers, but just in case, she dies in this one. So having somebody who's a children's presenter in this as well, again, added to that. You had Craig Charles, who at that point was peak Red Dwarf. Red Dwarf 6, I think, was probably being made or had just been aired around that time. So he was another very recognisable face, and he wasn't playing another character, much like everybody else. He was playing Craig Charles. He was just playing himself. He was out on the streets. And Craig Charles, unfortunately, as much as I love Craig Charles, I've seen Red Dwarf filmed, the latest episode that they did, so I love the man, but he's probably one of the worst things about Ghostwatch, I think, because he has quite a few moments that are just irritating. Here's just a brief highlight reel of the moments that Craig Charles wound me up in Ghostwatch.
Well, let's go to the main location of our program, the house in Foxhill Drive. Craig Charles, that well-known ghost hunter, is our reporter. Craig, how are you?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, I'm fine. I've taken the Valium, man. Here's Pam Haley, the mum of the house. Hello, Pam. And she's going to take us through the whole spine-tingling story.
Can you hear this? Are you hearing? It's coming from in...
But when Ghostwatch was on form, when it wasn't sort of being silly, which it did, kind of a lot of the times Craig Charles appeared on screen, like that jumping out of the cupboard moment was just, oh, come on, Craig Charles, be better. It genuinely was unsettling, because the story of Pipes, like, Pipes is the name of the ghost in this one. He's the name of the poltergeist who's tormenting these children, scratching them and everything, just being a really horrible presence. But you don't get a great deal of Pipes. And that's what works for this the most. You only see very, very brief, and I mean extremely brief, glimpses of him. I mean, take a look at this shot as the cupboard door opens. Which, by the way, this cupboard door is called a glory hole. Did anybody know that was a thing? Like, the cupboard under the stairs, the thing that Harry Potter sleeps in, is actually called a glory hole over here in the UK. Which, obviously, we kind of think is something completely different now. So every time they said the word glory hole in this, I really giggled, but I had no idea that glory hole meant anything other than, well, you know, that hole in the... So here's the clip of Pipes that's really creepy. That's it. A brief second that you can't even see all of him. But it does this several times. Like, there's a shot where it keeps going back to it and showing him standing by the window. And there's a reflection, at least I think. This is the thing with this. I don't know if I'm actually seeing Pipes or not, or whether it's something else. But this moment just after the cat scares Sarah Green, it looks to me like there is something in that window.
Some kids' pictures. I went here before. Look. Ah! I didn't know they had a cat. Did you?
But I just don't know. I'm just not sure. And that's what makes this so unsettling. It reminds me a lot of Hereditary, in a way. Hereditary is, in fact, in more ways, Hereditary is a movie that I think was genuinely scary because it didn't overshow things, but went a little bit crazy at the end and lost me. That's exactly what Ghostwatch does. It uses the shadows. It uses just brief shots just to not necessarily terrify instantly, but just make you think that you saw something. Make you very unsure of what you saw. And don't forget, again, this was 1992. Unless you had it on record, you couldn't just instantly go back and go, wait, was that what I think it was? I'm really not sure. So it played with people's minds. And it was such a slow burn as well. This thing went at a very, very slow pace for a lot of the time. But it was interesting while it did it. It needed that slow pace, so when things did ramp up, it became that much more terrifying. And it's telling as well that this was originally conceived as like a 6-part series. The final episode was going to be pretty much as we saw here with Ghostwatch. It was going to be a live show. I'm holding the mic, can't do too live show. But the first few episodes were going to be the build-up to it. It was going to be showing this family and the things that they were going for. Because the BBC didn't have the guts really to do that. They were just like, okay, let's just make it a 1-episode thing. Which turned out to be probably the worst thing they could have done for the backlash that they got. But I think it's better without it. I think coming into this story at the point that we do is awesome. Because we're right in the thick of it. It's Halloween night. We're right there for this live show beginning. And we learn things as we go. And there's great red herrings in this one as well, like the shot of the girl sort of banging on the wall, faking the presence of Pipes, throwing us off the scent, making us think maybe this isn't all real. And yeah, while it does lose the believability towards the end, I do kind of like what they did. Dr. Lynn Pascoe saying we've accidentally created a seance. Like, it makes sense with the narrative of this, because you've got all of these reports coming from different people all over the phone calls. From different places all around the country, all experiencing strange paranormal phenomenon. But they tie it in and make it make sense. That they caused this by doing what they're doing. By broadcasting this live, they've essentially given Pipes his power to break free. Like, it's a very clever story. And really, I struggle to understand how people thought this was real with how it ended, because you have Michael Parkinson possessed on the screen. Like, surely that must have been the point where you go, okay, you're right, it's definitely not real. But then again, 26 years ago, maybe people just weren't quite that switched on. We've seen so much in the horror world now, in the horror entertainment angle, that we know that things are fake. Like, it takes a lot to make us believe that something's real, but back then it wasn't. I mean, I fell for it until that moment. I remember even at the time, at my very young age, I remember being terrified of it all the way through, but as soon as Michael Parkinson got possessed at the end, even I knew that this wasn't real, but a lot of people did not. But the real question, I guess, then, is, as a whole, does it hold up? Is it still watchable now? And I'm inclined to say yes. It's got some issues. It has the children's acting in this one isn't that great to begin with. I think they do get better as they go along. As I say, some of it is very hokey. Like, some of it doesn't stand up to the test of time at all, but I'm still impressed by how dark this is able to go. I mean, listen to this bit about a murdered dog.
My youngest son, Gary, came running into the house in a real state. So when I calmed him down, it seemed that they'd been playing in here and they'd found this dead black Labrador.
Where did they find it?
Well, it was about here.
And how had it died?
Well, it had been cut open, like something in a butcher's shop.
Can you imagine the kind of person that would do something like that?
And is that all that happened?
Well, it was pregnant. There were fetuses scattered all over.
Christ, it's no wonder people got a little bit antsy about this, because that's a lot more detail than it needed to go into, but it did add to that realism. It did add to that shock value that it needed, and I really like the fact that Ghostwatch does play the long game. It has these little shocking moments, but it doesn't show it. Like, we don't see murdered dog fetuses, which I'm forever grateful for, but we hear about it. And as the story moves on as well, things very slowly amp up. Very, very slowly, but that works. That works as part of a live show, because they're depicting this as live. If things were to just be crazy from the off, no one would have believed it at all. But because it's a gradual process, because the writers of this, Stephen Volk, knew how to craft this story, he knew what would make people believe, it's all the better for it. It ends up being a very, very intriguing watch, even all of these years later. So it's a show that I very much think of like The Exorcist. The Exorcist is a movie that I heard a ton about growing up, like people being sick and passing out in the screens because it was such a shocking thing to see. And now when I watch The Exorcist, I don't find it that scary myself. I find it a very good film and a very creepy film, and at times it is scary, but not to that level. And it just shows how we've all moved on, how we're all a lot more accepting of things now. We don't scare quite as easily as we used to, as a whole, as a human race. We're a lot more accustomed to the sort of scary things that we see on TV and in movies now. So I don't think we're ever going to get something quite like this again. Ghostwatch was very much of its time. It aired at the perfect moment. 1992 was just the right time for this to go. If it had aired a few years later, really don't think it's something we'd even be talking about that much today. But because of when it did, because of how powerful it was at the time, and because it's a show on BBC One that is one of the first shows to ever be recorded as giving somebody PTSD, it's gone on to have that cult status. It's gone on to have people watch it every single year. And yeah, if you've never seen it before, tonight's a good night. Tonight's Halloween. Strongly recommend checking out Ghostwatch. And on that note, happy Halloween. Let me know what you're watching for Halloween tonight. Let me know if you've ever seen Ghostwatch as well. Let me know if you've got a good pumpkin. Let me know if you've got one that's rotting on the shelf like mine is. But if you're not going to watch Ghostwatch, let me know what you are watching tonight. Tonight is Halloween after all, so let me know what scary movie or scary show you're going to be watching. Let me know in the comments below. As for me, I'm going to go watch Slaughterhouse Rules. Hope that's good. It's a horror, so at least it's fitting. A review should be up for that one tomorrow. Do hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and let me know what kind of other videos you'd like me to make as well. You can also follow me on Twitter at JoeJulians. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you to all the people that have been subscribing and liking videos lately. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great Halloween, and I'll see you on the next video.